Hello everyone, my name is Nadeem Khan. Welcome to Uncommon Literature. Today I am going to tell you Preface to Lyrical Ballads by William Wordsworth. This essay is very important in Romanticism because when it came in 1798 it was written, and it came in 1801 with the collection of poems Lyrical Ballads. It started the new age in English literature that is called Romanticism. Now, why Wordsworth added this to the collection of poetry? We will understand that before this age there was Restoration time, or there was New Classical period. In Restoration time, the poets or the playwrights were writing in the high class elite language, which was difficult for the common people to understand. Okay. Secondly, the playwrights of comedy of manners were following the themes related to sexual vulgarity and all these themes, which were not favoring the society. The society was not interested into that because they considered it as vulgar. Another important part, that during this time industrialization and urbanization was also on peak. So this was one of the reasons of beginning of Romanticism. In France, there was French Revolution in 1789. This also helped the poets writing in the new age called Romanticism, because it talked about breaking away from the old beliefs and doing something revolutionary for their own selves. So 3 points you have to remember before we move to the essay. First, the industrialization was at its peak during this time. Second, French Revolution influenced the poets who were going to become romantic poets. The third point was of New Classical age, in which the poets were not catering to the common masses but to the elite high class only. So what are the main ideas in this essay? Wordsworth is considered as a poet and a worshipper of nature. You pick any poem of Wordsworth, he is worshipping the nature with his all heart. Okay, so he asks that what inspires poetry. So the answer is very simple, that the feeling, the desire to make something ordinary into extraordinary. For example, a small flower like daffodil, Tinton Abbey, a natural landscape. All these very small and natural things are helping Wordsworth and giving him topics to write his poetry. These are ordinary, but if we read it through the perspective of Wordsworth, they are extraordinary. Then Wordsworth moves further. He explains who is a poet. So you have to pay attention in the definition of poet, that he says a poet is a fellow human being. Okay, he is living with us and he is sharing the same ideas as we all have. But at the same time, he keeps on defining the poet as someone who has deeper sensitivity, okay, and a higher connection with his own feelings, and he can relate those feelings in a better way to the external objects. I explained that at one point he is saying that a poet is a fellow human being. On the other hand, he also adds that he should be having a high sense of sensitivity, that he should have a greater sense than all of us. Adding to it, he adds that a poet has a deeper connection with his own emotions, and he is more able to connect his emotions to the external objects. Clear? Moving ahead, he talks about that what should be the language of a poem. So he says the language of a poem should be of men, the real language of men, meaning of the language of ordinary masses, so that we can understand it very well, we can understand it easily, and there is no restriction to any class of the society. Remember the point I told you of New Classical high class language, that only it was restricted to the upper classes, the educated classes. But romantic poems are very easy to read, that anybody from any social strata can understand these poems. The important part comes here. He defines what is a definition of a poem. So he explains that a poem is a spontaneous overflow of powerful feelings recollected in tranquility. Okay, so my students, I have to draw your attention here that most of the literature students understand it to the half point only. You have to divide it into two halves and understand the complete definition given by Wordsworth. He says that when we see something and what sudden emotions we get into our heart, that is poetry. But you should not stop here, you should look at the other half as well. He later says that those emotions which we get suddenly after seeing something should not be expressed that time only, but we have to move away from that part, and when we are in a more calm place. Okay, tranquility means the calm place. So when we are in a completely silent or calm place, we have to recollect all those emotions which we got at the spontaneous movement, and then we have to brood over those emotions, and then we have to write the poetry. Now you have to pay attention whether Wordsworth is telling something new or he is telling you the same old strategy of writing any creative writing. I want to say, I believe that Wordsworth is here just twisting the words and saying the same thing, because it happens that earlier also the poets were not obviously writing it suddenly. The poets were thinking first, they were brooding over their thoughts, and then they were writing. So he is also saying the same thing, that we get the sudden emotions and then we have to recollect them later on. So there is a conflict of interest as far as you go into the deeper in this definition. The last important point of this essay is the term egotistical sublime. So you have to understand this term through the words of Wordsworth himself. So egotistical sublime is something when the author or a poet, gives his own perspective and imagination into his or her work. For example, when we read the work, we understand the perspective of the poet at the same time. So it happens when you read the poems of Wordsworth, at the same time you are understanding his ideas towards the nature, his perception, his emotions at that very moment which he felt. So this is something called egotistical sublime, when the poet is able to express his own perception into his work, and when the readers read it, they can feel the same. Okay, so try to think over these definitions of the poet. Poet definition is also contradictory. At the same time, he is saying a fellow human being, but on the other hand, he moves to say that he is a little extraordinary. And same thing is happening with the definition of the poem also. So I leave it on you. You read it in detail and then you write me in the comment. If you like my video, kindly subscribe to my channel. Thank you so much.